My name is Philo Ikonya from Kenya. I'm a poet, novelist, and human rights activist. And regarding Tibet, my connection has been that it's a very strong call for the whole world to wake up and see that we cannot stand any more immolations. I remember that the Dalai Lama in the past wanted to visit Kenya, and twice he was denied access. And we human rights activists questioned this, and this helped us to work for human rights as well in Kenya. So I'm deeply touched by what we have seen and the defense of the identity of a person and the precious voices that come from there. And I read this poem, My Tibetanness, by Tenzin Sundwe. My Tibetanness. 39 years in exile, yet no nation supports us, not a single bloody nation. We are refugees here, people of a lost country, citizen to no nation. Tibetans, the world's sympathy stock, serene monks and bubbly traditionalists, 1 lakh and several thousand odd, nicely mixed, steeped in various assimilating cultural hegemonies. At every checkpost and office, I am an Indian Tibetan. My registration certificate I renew every year with a salam, a foreigner born in India. I am more of an Indian, except for my chinky Tibetan face. Nepali, Thai, Japanese, Chinese, Naga, Manipuri, but never the question, Tibetan. I am Tibetan, but I am not from Tibet, never been there, yet I dream of dying there. 39 years in exile, yet no nation supports us, not a single bloody nation. I am Tibetan, but I am not from Tibet, never been there, yet I dream of dying there.
Oh.
So Namkho, you just gave a very powerful account of bearing witness in Tibet. And certainly if you'd been discovered filming the oppression as you did, then the consequences would have been very dire for you, very harsh. And I just wondered if you could explain to me what was your motivation in bearing witness in this way of the oppression in Tibet today?
When I was in Tibet, I met a lot of young generation and the older people. They just only expression their feeling about that His Holiness return to home. And now it's coming, the generations, the self-immolators become more and more. That I can't stop and become silence. I just let the world know if they are really human rights or the justice, well, then it's time for now. Otherwise, the Tibetans' life, who can save is that you can save. Outside the world leaders and the human rights defenders, they can save Tibetan lives, no one else.
Mm. So you really feel that change has to come from inside Tibet, and do you feel that the international community has to support that process?
Of course, that's why United Nations there, so that's why I'm just like a messenger, you know. I was been there I know what is happening inside Tibet, so I saw on my eyes, and so I just went, let the world know now it's time to act, and otherwise, as I mentioned, so no one can save Tibet's life. Only the United Nations or the human rights defenders, they can save Tibetans' lives.
Thank you, Namkho. So, Dhardon Sharling, you're the youngest parliamentarian in the Tibetan exile government in Dharamsala in India, where the Dalai Lama lives.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about the challenges that you face as a parliamentarian in an exile government at a moment of political crisis in your homeland?
Right. I think being a member of the parliament at a time when His Holiness decided to devolve his political authority and hand over all the political responsibilities to the elected leadership, including us, and then at a time when there is a clarion call from Tibetans inside Tibet for greater freedom inside Tibet, and when Tibetans inside Tibet, who we refer to as our bosses, saying they do not want to live under the current Chinese occupation, and then at a time when China is becoming strong, or as in it is succeeding in a sense in becoming a big bully in the world, at such a given scenario, to be entrusted with the responsibility to carry on the Tibetan leadership forward, I think it is the most challenging task, because we do not have a clear picture as to where things will go ahead. The way forward is something it's very difficult for us to chalk out plans for a way forward, because much is resting on the shoulders of the Chinese leadership, who's showing no signs of responding to the crisis inside Tibet. So the onus is on the Tibetan leadership in exile, because every time there's a self-immolation, they have placed a demand, and it's very clear that they are voicing it out to us. There's a call from people inside Tibet, and we are having to respond to that. And so overall, very challenging, but at the same time, I don't think we could say it's a difficult task and leave it like that. We have to also kind of gear up and roll our sleeves and get going according to the changing scenario inside Tibet, and just be very proactive to what is happening inside Tibet, and also to be able to engage with the international community, with the world leaders, and having them engage with the Chinese leadership. So it's a very dynamic task, I would say, for the Tibetan leadership in exile, and also to make sure that Tibet continues to bring hope to the rest of the world, and that Tibet is not a dark story where people have to just feel sorry and sad, but how the Tibetan struggle is in fact throwing a light on the changing face of the non-violent struggle, and how that could set a good precedent for the rest of the non-violent struggle in the 21st century. So it's an enormous task. I would sometimes say the political leader in exile has a more difficult task than Obama of the US, because the road is not clear. There's no proper structure for us to work under. Yeah.
So could I ask about your personal background?
Yeah.
You were born in exile?
Yes.
And how do you feel about, personally as a young generation Tibetan growing up in exile in India, the second home of the Tibetans, His Holiness always says second home, and how do you feel about connecting to the situation in Tibet, and how does it make you feel? How do you cope with the daily demands of the evolving crisis?
Yes, definitely. Personally, as a young Tibetan woman, what happens is, for me these days, my day starts and begins with thoughts of people inside Tibet, because that not just draws your attention, but it draws your spirit. It just demands yourself to be committed and to be attentive to what's happening inside Tibet. And though I was never born in Tibet, the desperation, I would say, is higher in me, in people like me who've never been to one's own land, but knows the series of tragic events unfolding inside Tibet, and that's why it just takes up all your attention. And personally for me, I had to forego the prospects of my further studies, because it demanded my time and my contribution to the Tibetan struggle. And in encouraging younger Tibetans to take the lead in the political struggle, looking at how the 2008 protests inside Tibet were led by very young Tibetans. And 2008 was a very instrumental period in my life where I had to switch gears from wanting to become a scholar or a writer or a television journalist to that of getting hands-on involved in the political activism. So I would say, again, Tibetans inside Tibet, their struggle, their commitment dictates what we do. I don't think we could choose to live the life you want to. You're always responding to them, and it's they who are going to define your career, your goals and your dreams, and it continues for me personally.
So the Tibetan identity is always there and always present. Yeah. Thank you.
All right.
Shao Jiang, you're living in exile in the UK. You're a former activist in China, and you served sentence in prison for your peaceful activism, and you're truly dedicated to that. I just want to ask, what sparked your interest in the Tibet issue and your deep involvement in the Tibetan cause now?
I was born in Mongolia, so I grew up in Mongolia. So in Mongolia, this also is the Mongolia nationality issue. So when I was a child, I understand some is a majority issue. When I studied in Beijing University, actually the Tibetan protest in 1980s. We are protest in 1980s. I get some information from the underground magazine and magazine from Hong Kong. I very sympathize the Tibetan case. I know this problem because the government always use propaganda, try to give the only one version. So I just try to get the other version on Tibet. But during that time, not very deeply understand the Tibetan issue. When after I was in exile, I tried to research about the whole Tibetan issues, especially about the Tibetan historical rule, and I can give the very totally different version from my education, because my education kind of brainwash the education. I must keep concern for all my education, criticize my education. And that I very interested in Tibetan case. So this Tibetan issue, if I compare the Chinese human rights violation, I understand is the Communist Party occupy the Tibet in name of the Han Chinese. Sometimes they provoke the hatred between the nationality, Tibetan and Chinese and other minority nationalities. This kind of the Communist Party ruling strategy is just provoke hatred, and they gave the version to push you follow the propaganda way.
So really the real splitists are the Chinese in a way, because they're attempting to create this gulf. And you've met the Dalai Lama a couple of occasions in exile. What do you think of the Dalai Lama? Have you had good conversations with him?
Normally it's not so much conversation, just short speech. Say Dashideli and something. I think the Dalai Lama is the charisma leader, is the kind of the good figure for the approach Tibetan religion and other case. I think very important for Tibet, which international community and understand the Tibetan issue, and also he played a very important role when the exile government set up especially he transfer the power to the secular, the politician.
Yes.
That's very important because this means Tibetan can say they can transfer democracy. This Chinese government always talk the Chinese is we have the 5,000 year civilization, Tibetan uncivilization. But if this means if the Chinese government not occupy Tibet, Tibetan can definitely become democracy.
Yes.
And
That's a
they
very
can
good point.
protect their human rights. That
Very
is
good point. Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you, Shao
Thank you.
Jiang.